Hello everyone and welcome back to another Darktide video. Today we'll be covering Havoc level 40 and what builds that I personally like and think are the most effective, as well as comparing them and basing them off of what else I have seen. Now I have used all four of these builds on Havoc 40, so I do have practice and experience when I say that these builds do work at those difficulties. Also as well, I already have True Survivor, so this isn't coming from a place of inexperience or that I've played a little bit and try to pretend like I know what I'm talking about. So with that, get it started. We'll start covering each of the classes and go over what the builds are and then talking about weapon preferences and such. Alright, so starting off, we have Psyker. And with Psyker, the thing that I like to run a lot, now this isn't necessarily mandatory again, and this is dependent as well as team comp. So let's say you already have a Psyker on your team and you're also playing Psyker. That isn't a bad thing on Havoc. You can double up on classes that you're playing as. It's just a matter of what are you bringing that they don't already have covered. So with that being said, we have the Dueling Sword Mark IV. And with the Dueling Sword Mark IV, we're running it with Carapace and Maniacs, and then we're going Thrust. Now, it says Agile here, but what you should have instead of Agile as your blessings is Uncanny Strike or Precognition. Now, if you don't have Thrust on there, I would also say do Precognition and then Uncanny Strike as both of them together, because that's going to give you 60% finesse damage, which this does a lot of already, but it's going to give it an extra bonus. And then on top of it too, Uncanny Strike will make it so that you can two-shot the Maulers and Crushers because of all the rending you're going to have on it. Now going down here, also actually real quick to cover, you can also use the Blaze Force Greatsword if you're using it for like horde clearing, but then you have to have obviously an offset staff. I would not recommend a gun on Psyker because you're already competing with so little ammo already. You're kind of relegated to using staffs here, unless you have 4 Psykers, and in that case, 1 Psyker with a gun wouldn't be terrible. But you are the generic build that I like to run on Havoc, unless, again, there's other specifications going on, is the Inferno of Force Staff. And with this one here, we have Flak and Maniacs, and then we run Warp Nexus and Blaze Away. Now, the reason why we do this is that we want to be able to kill Maniacs, but we also want to be able to kill the flak armor enemies. Also, if we have Mobians with one of the modifiers, you want to be able to do enough damage to them so that you can actually clear them pretty quickly, as you are going to get swarmed very fast. Now, the reason why flak is also nice, though, is because, as you can see here, as I am attacking this Mauler, I was able to kill him in 2 bursts, and if there's a group of them, that is really good. It can also help, too, if a bunch of Ragers are coming. As you can see, I am doing a lot of dot to them, so if you have teammates, that's going to help and take care of them even quicker. But if you have another Psyker with an Inferno staff, then you can do something like maybe the Trauma or the Void. That's totally up to you, but for generic purposes, this is definitely something that I like to run because of how it fits. But then going over to Curios here, I run health. Now, the reason why I run health and I don't run toughness is simply for the fact of how fast toughness gets dropped in this game because of gunners. And more toughness isn't inherently going to mean that you're going to survive. They're still going to instantly delete your toughness. And then it comes down to if you have health or not to take the hit. Yes, toughness will help and it does come back, but because it's bursts of damage, this is where I like having more health, just because then if I do get damage, then I can take a little bit of health damage and I don't go down instantly. Now with the perks here, we have Stamina Regeneration, Combat Ability Regeneration, and Damage Resistance from Gunners. And again, the whole point is because on Havoc, how Gunners work is you don't have the iframes after your toughness is broken, so you want that bonus that you get from the damage resistance on them. And it does add up very quickly because of how much they are actually doing. And then Combat Ability Regeneration, simply for the fact that you have the ability to spam your actual ability, which is very important on Havoc. Now going over to the talents, now again, like I said, you can run different things, but there's really one ability you can run here with Psyker that's going to be very efficient for the team. But the different blitz abilities you have can vary depending on what you need. Again, this is just general use that I think is very good and covers a lot of bases for the team. So for the left, we have Soul Stealer, which is 7.5 toughness on Warp Attack Kill. So you're killing hordes of enemies, you're going to be gaining a lot of toughness back. On the right here, we have metal. Critical hits replenish toughness, and since we are doing a crit build with the Inferno Staff, we will be doing a lot of that. And also it gives us movement speed for 4 seconds, which stacks 3 times. Not really a huge part of it, but it is a nice little bonus. Then we have perfect timing. Warp damage is increased by 3% for 10 seconds on a critical hit. This stacks 5 times. Again, we are using a crit build, so it's going to proc a lot. Then we have Quietude, replenish toughness by 5% for each 10% of peril quelled. We're going to be doing that a lot, and we also have things later on that also quell, and you'll see them here shortly. So that's just a good thing to constantly get toughness back. Warp expenditure, replenish toughness for every 10% peril generated, and since we're staying at high peril and we're going to be fluctuating, it should be very easy for us to keep it up. And then here, 10% chance to quell 10% peril on kill. Since we are killing hordes, that means you have a very high chance of at least quelling, which means you are then going to get some toughness back because of it as a result. So then we go to the right here, which is toughness. Either one is fine, up to you. It literally is the exact same. But then I go into smite because of the ability to stop all of the heavies and armor that comes towards you. And with that, I run enfeeble and lightning storm, so we have 1 extra body we can jump. And also, too, they take 10% more damage from all sources. Now, I like to run Charge Strike just for a little bit of dot from heavy melee attacks, but you don't have to do this. And if you take this off, you can go into Deflector, which is down here. It's called Kinetic Deflection. And I would say take off that and use this, as then if you're blocking, you're also going to generate peril and stamina instead of just one or the other. So you can actually block more, which is really useful for like stalling a monstrosity. But coming back up here, 5% peril generation, which is good, or 5% less, I should say. Then we have Psykinetics Aura, which is decreased cooldown when elites or specialists are killed, either from us or allies, which is really good for our ability again up here. Then we have Toughness Damage Reduction, always nice again, just so we don't die as fast. Then we have Seer's Presence. Now the reason why I like Seer's Presence over these other ones is because it gives us cooldown reduction. And that cooldown reduction is super useful because that means we can spam more, and it is very important to be spamming as much as possible. Next, we have Toughness Damage Reduction again. This is the only one we can go into. Then we have one with the Warp, so we take less damage, and it gives us more Toughness Damage Reduction based on our peril. And since we're staying at high peril, we should always have near 33%. And then here's the big one that really just lets Psyker go crazy, and that's Telekine Shield. I don't think there's another ability you can argue is actually as useful as this, regardless of what route you go. But if you're the solo Psyker, you're going to want to go to the right with Telekine Dome and Sanctuary. Having that extra toughness regeneration, toughness damage reduction on pop, and how long it lasts is just so useful. And then if you have a second Psyker, what you can do is run to the left one here, and then you can stall out specialist enemies, so that way you can deal with them before they get to you. But then going on below here, we have critical chance boost, and then we go to the middle, which is 10% health, and on the left we have more 5% less peril generation. Going over, we have quell speed increased by 30%, and then going down, we have Warp Rider. 20% damage increases as our peril goes up, so we're going to always be near 20%, hopefully. Then we have toughness boost, and then we have empowered psionics. And the reason why I like this a lot is that it lets our smite deal with hordes, and that's good too if like we're surrounded and we can't really use the Inferno Staff. You can just smite instead and kit all of the horde around you. But it also stops all the armored enemies as well, which can set up for your teammates again, as we talked about. Then down here, when we say we use a psionic, we replenish 15% toughness to us and our allies. To the right here, we have a guaranteed chance to empower it on elite kills, which we will be doing a lot with melee. And then charged up, which is now we can hold 3 of them as opposed to just 1. So then you can back-to-back keep blasting it and get toughness back up, essentially, and keep yourself and your teammates potentially alive a little bit longer. But that's it for Psyker. And then moving on, next we'll be covering the Ogryn. Alright, so covering Ogryn builds for Havoc 40 and any other Havoc at that point then. For this one, you can run 2 different variations. Again, the generic one, though, I would say you definitely want to go with a shield, as what it offers and provides to the team is just so good. But obviously, you can run side and other builds for it as well if you have other niches covered. But since Ogryn is such a big target and gunners are such a threat, this is the build I find can just cover and carry on anything. And it really prevents your teammates from dying as long as they know to play around an Ogryn and to be smart enough to sit behind the giant walking tank. But also this build does a lot of things for your team, which is also pull aggro and also make it so that big enemies are not really a threat, as you can just keep them all from attacking or knocking them down and CCing them. So starting, we have the Battle Maul and Slap Shield. And for this, we went all in on block. Now, you don't need defenses, as you don't really need that extra little boost of what defenses offers. I've looked at 80% to 60%, and it's so negligible that it's better to just go for damage in case you're clearing hordes, as opposed to the slight increase of defense that it would offer you if you had 80%. But for the perks, we have block efficiency and stamina. Now, the reason these are so good, obviously, it shouldn't be surprising that on Havoc, enemies shoot really fast, and there's a lot of them. So having the extra stamina and the extra block means you can block more bullets for longer without having your guard dropped and getting melted. It also lets you push up and walk through enemies so that you can do it that way. We also have Last Guard and Skull Crusher as well. Now, for Last Guard, the reason why this is really good is because this gives you the ability to have a 30% block cost as well in reduction, meaning you can block even more on top of it. And if your block gets braked, you push enemies back, which is good. So you have like a little mini pulse in case someone drops your shields. Now, obviously, if you're tanking a bunch of gunners, it's not going to do anything, but it's a close proximity. So it's good if you're getting swarmed by a bunch of heavy enemies or a bunch of small ones and they're trying to get you, and you're blocking and not using the shield special. And then we have Skull Crusher, which is you add stacks of plus 10% damage if they're staggered already. Now, with this weapon, since it staggers everything, and you have the ability to stagger anything, this is just a perfect blessing to have on this weapon, as you can gain free bonus damage to everything you do. And since it says target receives it, it's not you yourself that are getting buffed, it's the enemies that are getting debuffed, meaning that you can also make them easier to be killed for your teammates. Now, going on to the Rumbler. Now, you may see people bringing other guns and stuff for this. For instance, like the new heavy stubber that came out, or maybe the shotgun or something. But this is the weapon I find to be the most useful, and it may be surprising as to why, but I will showcase it here in a second. Now, what you want for this, obviously, is less mobility, because you want everything else to be max on this. Now, this is a good single target damaging weapon that can do really useful and efficient damage on bosses. But what also it's good for is single target unyielding enemies, and specifically bulwarks and reapers. It'll also disrupt any of the gunners as well if you hit them with it or explodes near them, which will help give CC. And if for some reason you're not blocking or if you're out of stamina, you can fire at your feet and move things around. So for the perks, we have Unyielding and Flak. Flak, because of just general use case, Carapace doesn't do enough to actually hit any valuable breakpoints, so there's no point to put it on. And Unyielding lets it one-shot Reapers. So for the blessings here, we have Adhesive Charge. Your grenades stick to Ogryns and Monstrosities, plus you gain 15% damage versus Ogryns and Monstrosities. This is very important. And then finally, we have Shattering Impact, which target receives 4 stacks of 2.5% brittleness on direct projectile hit. Debuff lasts for 5 seconds and can have a maximum of 16 stacks. So what happens is you can actually just fire this at like a Crusher or at Mauler, and you will hit them directly because it's very easy to hit them, and you will make them easier to kill for your teammates, as well as stunning them or knocking them over potentially. But for reference here, we fired at the Reaper. The Reaper will die instantly, no questions asked. We fire it at the Crusher. It'll stagger them for just a split second and push them, but they will then have been debuffed. Now, again, like I said, this is really good for that single target damage. You can fire it at Crushers. It's not going to do a whole lot to them, though, so there's no point to keep using it continuously as like a way to get rid of them. But you can fire it into like a group of them and try to get some damage, but it also helps with dealing with hordes if they have it. But the real thing it's good for is when you're blocking, since you really don't care about Crushers and Maulers, the only things that are a threat are Gunners and such. Being able to shoot them and debuff them and then do things like that where you can hit them, weaken them, and then blow them up makes it really efficient and strong at being able to single them out and kill them. And Reapers being the biggest threats here, being able to just shoot one, unless they are pus hardened, will insta-kill them. And then Bulwarks, if you're able to hit them, other than this crit. But you will also do a lot of damage to them. Now going into the Curios here, as I said before, in the Psyker one, I only like bringing health because toughness is depleted so quickly that you just don't get as much value out of it. Also, too, with the negative toughness and negative health debuff that you get from the higher Havocs, you get even less value out of toughness, and it's harder to push into the higher portions of toughness, even with max toughness Curios. So I run health for that reason. And now for this one, instead of running ability regeneration like Psyker, everything is the same here except that we have even more block efficiency. Again, being the point of when we have the shield out and we're blocking, we have a massive stamina bar. So if we are blocking and trying to move up and push, we can just move and not have to deal with them shooting us. And then we can eventually get to them to push them, to taunt them. Now covering the talents themselves, we have Furious. For each enemy hit during the same heavy melee attack, gain 2.5% damage on your next melee attack. You're using the shield, you hit everything, so it's very easy to use this. Then we have the best defense, replenish 20% toughness after hitting multiple enemies with a single heavy attack. Again, you're using the shield, this is very easy. Then we have toughness boost, plus 25 toughness. Now you will never have super high toughness in this game mode, but since Ogryn has access to really high toughness boosters, you can just put this one on here to help try to mitigate some of that cost, and then you have a massive HP pool to work with as well. Then into the middle, we have Heavyweight. Again, you need this to hit the breakpoints on Reapers, but you get 30% damage against Bulwarks, Crushers, Plague Ogryns, and Reapers. Also 30% damage reduction against the same, meaning again, these enemies are going to do even less to you. You can actually take an overhead from a Mauler or a Crusher if they do hit you from overhead as an Ogryn with this build because of all the damage reduction you have. Then to the bottom right, toughness replenished while incoherency is increased by 50%. The reason why we hit this is because we have to get to the next item here. For the talents, so it's a mandatory one we must take. We have toughness boost, and then we have frag bomb. This is insane, and if you have an Ogryn on your team that is running frag bomb, which they really should be, they are the go-to pick for grenades, and they should be the priority in case you find grenades laying around, as this frag bomb here can clear entire rooms and can make any threat non-existent, as well as make anything that is alive still almost close to dead and very easy to be finished off. This is great for the team, and the only thing it doesn't do well against is bosses, which is fine because if you're fighting a boss, you have another role, which is to be taunting them and preventing your teammates from getting attacked. Then we have Soften Them Up. Enemies damage value take 15% more damage for 5 seconds. This is just a very easy ability to make use of, and this applies to everything. So the whole thing is to debuff enemies and make your teammates be able to kill them faster while you take all the aggro. Now going to the middle, we have toughness damage reduction, really useful for us, as we do have pretty decent toughness even at 40 Havoc. Now here's the big one here, Loyal Protector. This is the perk that is, or the ability that is so good on Ogryn. If you have an Ogryn with Loyal Protector already, you could go into an Indomitable build, and that would be the other side grade to go into. And the reason is because then you can rush things. The only problem is this ability, it loses a lot of value on Havoc because of how gunners work. The only time you'll be using this then is to interact with bosses or groups that get too close to your team where you can knock them down and then CC them for your team. And then maybe either apply a bunch of bleed or regenerate a bunch of, or increase a bunch of base damage, I should say. And then also regenerate toughness. So the go-to though is definitely Loyal Protector. And if you could cycle between two Ogryns using Loyal Protector, that is also still very useful. And the reason why it is so good, though, is that it also taunts and stuns enemies. It doesn't just taunt them. It doesn't say it here. It just says it taunts them. But what it does is it actually pulses out and will CC enemies briefly until they start attacking you. So here we have Valuable Distraction, though. As I said before, our whole objective here is to debuff and to buff ourselves and then make enemies weak. They all take 25% base damage additionally to sources. This is just so insane with how big the radius of this taunt is, that it's such a massive taunt and debuff to enemies. It makes them very easy to deal with then, excuse me, and very easy to kill. And then finally, Big Lungs. Loyal Protector has 50% bonus radius. Again, this makes this taunt absolutely insane. Entire hordes can be taunted. Enemies from other rooms can be taunted in. It's just so amazing and so nice. And one of the nice things here is too, is this taunt, it works sometimes on bosses, but that's the big monstrosity bosses. The smaller bosses, the ones that are humanoid sized from the assassination missions, those ones do get taunted and can be infinitely taunted, meaning that you can infinitely have these guys targeting you, and since they will only melee you, you can prevent them from being a threat to any of your teammates. Now going to the right, we have Reload Boost. The reason why I have this is simply for the fact of you can reload your weapon faster, and that lets you spam the Rumbler. You could go to the left for plus rending, but rending isn't going to do you a whole lot, and since we're not following much into the tree, you don't really need to. And applying bleed is nice if we were going into like a bleed tank build down here, but we're not, so we really don't need to go into batter. So instead we come down into here, which is Big Boom, which gives us increased explosion radius by 27.5%. Now again, we talked about how the frag bomb is so insane. And just to demonstrate here, I will throw the frag bomb at this Ogryn over there, the Reaper, and you can see it almost killed everything. The mutant and the dog were the only things that lived from over there. And the same thing can be said if I throw it over to like these Razors. Again, it cleared everything except for the Carapace Armored Reaper, which you can then finish off immediately like that. And that's why we put the blast radius on it, because that blast radius is so insanely huge. It lets us clear rooms even better and makes it even more efficient. Next, we go into the middle for health boost. Then we have 1% damage to your next melee attack on enemy stagger, which stacks 25 times. It lasts 10 seconds. The larger the enemy, the more stacks are earned. You stagger everything with this build. So this is all free for you to be able to stagger and work on and get free bonus damage. Next, we have Stay Close, 25% toughness replenishment for you and allies and coherency. This is really good. Again, just trying to keep your allies alive and keep the toughness high. Going down, we get more toughness from toughness boost. And then here, it's just really taking all of these trees because they're so good. We have Get Stuck In. On activating your combat ability, allies gain movement speed and are immune to stuns and suppression. This is just good in case they were suppressed. You can cure the suppression immediately. And if they were getting stunned before from things, they won't now, which lets them just move around, and the movement speed is so nice. On the left, blocking or pushing enemies taunts them for 8 seconds. Again, this is super useful on the humanoid bosses from assassination. And then any enemies at all after that, you can just taunt them. Now, payback time, 20% damage for 5 seconds after being hit by a melee attack. This is just good. I like getting the bonus damage if you are hit by melee, so you can constantly have just free extra damage if you are getting hit. We have Bruiser, which is combat ability cooldown. When an ally or you kill an elite enemy, due to the elite enemy spams in this, you can have taunt up really fast, which makes it really nice and useful. Then we get more toughness. Then we have your pushers have 250% stagger. Can only trigger once every 8 seconds. The reason why this means anything is because if I come over here to this crusher, you can push them back. Now you have to wait for cooldown obviously, but you can see normally my push does nothing to them. But when you get the cooldown back up, you can push them back. This is really useful again for just more free CC to make your way through crowds and things like that. Next we have to the right, Won't Give In, 20% damage reduction for each knockdown or incapacitated allies. You actually can revive clutch very easily with this build since you'll take so little damage when your teammates start dropping, if that is the case in Havoc. And it makes you just a really difficult enemy to deal with and kill. Thus, you can kind of clutch games out and revive entire teams by yourself because of it. Finally, we have Health Boost, which again, more health. And then we have Feel No Pain. Now, you could go into Heavy Hitter, but since the whole point of this build is to be as tanky as possible and take as little damage as possible, and all of this stuff here helps us do that, we go into Feel No Pain, which gives us toughness, replenishment, and damage reduction. Then we have Strongest. Pushing enemies restores 1 stack, and since you're pushing constantly, this is perfect. On the left, we have when it reaches 0, you push back enemies and replenish 20% toughness, which is really good. Again, a little tiny pulse for a second. Again, the whole gimmick being we don't want anyone touching us or our teammates, so having constant CC is great. And then Feel No Pain grants 2.5% toughness replenishment per stack. So, again, just constantly trying to have our toughness high while having our HP high. The only trade-off with this build is, since you are so built into being a tank, you lack some of the ability to do damage. However, that is immediately changed and made negligible because you were able to CC and taunt everything from attacking your teammates, that it does not matter that you are not killing them, as your teammates get free ability to kill them. And having that ability and leniency to just attack whatever you want is what makes this build shine. Otherwise, that's going to do it for Ogryn, and now we will go into Veteran. Moving on to the Veteran. So for the Veteran, again, we have the Dueling Sword, Mark IV again. Now, you can also run the Chainsword, and I have used that on the higher end. Havoc as well. And the only difference is if you're using the Chainsword, that is going to be your Horde clear. And the only difference then that makes is that your teammates need to make sure they have better single target melee damage. Since you're stuck with the Spearhead, Bolt Gun, Plasma would be the 2 I would recommend. And also, since ammo is so tight, it can make it harder for you to clear them. It's not impossible, and it's definitely not a negative, but if you're going for something that can deal with single target, then you'd want the Dueling Sword. But the Chainsword itself is extremely efficient at killing hordes, as long as you are smart with it and know how to use it properly. But covering the Spearhead, Bolt Gun then, for this, we have Unyielding Carapace, and then we have Puncture and Pinning Fire. Now, the reason why we have those is because they are very effective at killing armored enemies, as you can see. Now, the reason why you want that is because this is going to be your just in case of emergency, but also this is going to be your boss killing weapon, since you will be able to do all the damage to the bosses for the team while they try to melee it and you can save it. The big difference between vet and other builds is, though, is that you're going to want to save your ammo and only use it selectively for emergencies. Otherwise, melee will be your go-to, and you won't be shooting as much as you think. Now, going down here again, we do have Curios that give health. Again, it's just my go-to in general, and I think it is super good here. But we also have 15% additional toughness added onto this build, as well as the generic gunners and stamina generation. So we have close order drill, 33% toughness damage reduction, which is really good for us. We want to be as tanky as possible when we're in a big group. We replenish toughness on a leader specialist enemy kill, an additional 20% over 10 seconds. And this will play a role later on. Then going down, we have stamina boost, which is good for our dueling sword. Then we have toughness boost. Then we have left here, and the reason why we have shredder frags is we already have so many ways to deal with armored enemies. Whether it's the dueling sword here itself, or it's the bolt gun. We don't really need another way to deal with them. So instead, what we do is we have the shredder frags, and the reason why this is so good is because if there is a horde coming, what you can do, or even if there's some special enemies, disablers and whatnot, you can throw this to weaken them all and set it up for your team so that they are hurt and they can die quicker if you don't have any setup already and it's last minute emergency and you just need to start swinging. So going down from the shredder frags, we have range damage increased by 5%. Then we have get back in the fight. So if we do have our toughness broken, we have stun immunity, we have slow immunity for 6 seconds, and we store 50% of our stamina, which is good if we're fighting and sprinting and moving around a lot. Then below it, we have probably the most important aura that you can have as vet for this, which is survivalist. And the reason why this is so important is because if you're picking up ammo, you're going to be getting like 6 bullets per pickup on the small bags here, which is not a lot. But if you're the only one shooting your gun more frequently than your teammates, and you have survivalists, you're able to offset your teammates' use of their ammo by simply just existing and standing near them, which is super important, and means that you get more of the ammo pickup since they should be less starved for ammo. Now moving down, we have reload speed, which is helpful for the bolter. Then we go to the middle for toughness damage reduction. And then we have grenade replenishment every 60 seconds. This lets the Zealots and Ogryns prioritize picking up their grenades, whether it's the big frag bomb Ogryn or the stun storm grenades for the Zealot or whatever combination they use. Then we have field improvisation. And this means that we get grenades from ammo packs, which is good for the entire team that uses them. Your med packs heal faster, they cleanse corruption, and they give toughness per second, which just means in a pinch you can throw these down and you can take care of the team in any sense of the way. And if you, for some reason, have not seen frags in a while, you can drop these to give the grenades to yourself, your teammates, whoever needs it at the time. Then coming down here, we have voice of command, and we also have duty and honor. Now, voice of command, again, is just the only ability that really makes sense here. Executioner stance, to highlight them, doesn't really do much since you can't stick your head out too often unless you have a bubble shield. But there will be times when you don't have a bubble shield. So giving yourself that voice of command for that toughness for a split second is going to make the difference of being able to shoot and engage or just have to be stuck behind cover or potentially get down. And infiltrate, it just does not work that well since when you're infiltrating, when you break infiltration, yes, you'll have less aggro drawn on you for a little bit of time. But if you try to use this to aggress enemies, once that stops and they start targeting you, you will get gunned down instantly and you'll be out of your teammates' range to help you. So going back down here then, we have suppression boost. Then we'll go to the right first, which gives us melee damage. Then we have close quarters kill zone, so if we use our ability, we get 15% close damage. Then we have Desperado, which is melee critical hit chance by 10%, and we get 25% melee finesse bonus, which is extremely good, especially if you're using the chainsword or the dueling sword. That's going to give you a lot of boost to your damage. Then going down from there, we have toughness boost. Again, just more toughness is good. You could put it into a talent, but the 25 toughness is really helpful and nice for the vet. So where we can get it, we should put it into it. Then going left all the way, we have range damage boost. So now we have 10% with both of them stacked. Now we went for precision strikes here. You could argue to go to gain suppression immunity, but since you are in the bubble a lot of the times, or you're using your shout, it shouldn't matter too much. But you could go for suppression immunity if you want. I would prefer to have precision strikes because that weak spot damage is going to be helpful for bosses or for having to blast into an enemy or have to snipe on headshots. You want to be able to make sure that you kill them as quickly as possible. Then we have fully loaded. Since ammo is so scarce, the 25% boost to ammo is very important and very necessary. And then marksman. So when we do use our ability, we get additional weak spot damage by 20%, by 20% for 10 seconds. Then we go down into the middle, which we have Born Leader. Any toughness we replenish, our allies get. And since there's a bunch of elites and specials right here, confirmed kill is going to be proccing a lot for us. And that means that it is going to proc for our teammates as well. Then we have your combat ability, gives you allies and coherency 10% melee base damage and 10% range base damage. So the reason why we like to run for the Emperor as well is that we are in coherency most of the time anyways. If we're pressing our ability, we're now boosting everyone to do even more damage. Then we have Tactical Awareness. Special enemies kills gives us 6 seconds reduced on our cooldown. Since there's so many specialists again, this is just constantly another free set of cooldown that we can use. Then to the left, we have Iron Will, which is if we have over 75% toughness, we take 50% reduced toughness damage. Again, this is just to help save and mitigate how much toughness we lose initially in the middle of a fight, which can help save your life. Then we have toughness boost again. Then we have give 10% rending to all weapons and 20% damage to Ogryns and monstrosities. Really sending home and driving the point forward that you press your ability and you can just auto kill anything like this and just annihilate them and do as much damage as possible. That's going to be it for the vet. You could also use the plasma gun as well if that is a weapon you want to use. But you definitely want to have one of the high damage weapons, especially if no one else in your team has really good boss killing or good burst potential to really take care of armored targets, because you do get them in droves on Havoc 40. But other than that, we'll now go into Zealot. And finally, we have Zealot. Now, Zealot is the last one and also one of the most versatile, again, kind of like Vet and Psyker in a way, where once you have the core person covered, you can kind of run a lot of stuff and you can make up a lot of shortcomings for the team dependent on what you want. But unlike Psyker and Vet, who have certain niches they have to fill almost automatically, Zealot really just has the keep the team alive niche, and then you can kind of go from there where you want. So starting with the dueling sword, it's the same as before. I'm not going to really cover it too much. You've seen it now 3 times. The only difference is that you can also, again, run something different, like with the Psyker with the Blaze Force Greatsword or the Chain Sword. With the Vet, you could run potentially the Relic Blade, which doesn't do bad against armored enemies if you have it going and activated. The big thing that I like to run with this build, though, is the Purgation Flamer. Now, you could also run maybe the Bolter if you need single target damage, but I really like the Purgation Flamer because it does good with monstrosities if you build it for it, and it deals with all armor minus Carapace. So if there is Carapace, you are going to struggle a little bit with this, but that's why, again, you have the dueling sword and you have other teammates to help you with that. So with the Purgation Flamer, we have Unyielding and Flak. Now, I found that these are the 2 best, as we already have Infested extra damage. On armor, it's not going to matter about the fire since you're going to shred them, and Carapace doesn't take enough for it to warrant putting actually the Carapace perk on. And then we have Penetrating Flame and Blaze Away. So we have way extra high strength, stacking up to 40%, and then we have Penetrating Flame, which is brittleness, stacking 20 times, which gives us really huge damage to Flak. So I will show, for instance, here, if we do it to, let's say, the Reapers, you can see that, and then if I maybe aim it at the Bulwark here, you can see it is doing immense damage to them. And as they're getting hit by other things and running up to us, we're going to kill them so quickly because of it. Now here, I'll show you it doing it against the Mauler. And there you go. As you can see, Mauler absolutely melted. And that was with nothing else going on. Me standing here by myself firing at them, which is why it makes it so good. Now for the Curios, this is the only class and that I actually prefer to have toughness onto it, just because of the health bonuses we already have, as well as the toughness damage reduction we have, and on top of it as well, we do have the bonus 5%, 5%, 5% health here, Otherwise, it's gunners and stamina regeneration, just like before. Very crucial when doing Havoc. And then the health and the toughness makes us a lot tankier, so we can actually fight and keep playing. And since we have the ability to survive so well already with Zealot, having a little bit of extra toughness is just that icing on the cake that really takes us into a more tanky build. Now, going into the build itself and the talents, there are a few ways you can do this. I will talk about both of them only because they are very similar in build style, minus a few things which you can switch up yourself depending on what you want. But otherwise, this is what I prefer in terms of using it. So we'll start from the bottom here, actually. We have Purge the Unclean. Now, if you go into certain builds, you can remove this, but I like this for the unyielding and infested damage, especially that unyielding when you're fighting monstrosities. Makes it very efficient and very useful. You can annihilate like Plague Ogrins and Beasts of Nurgles. You really can't do this with the Flesh Bags, only because their mobility is so high. But because your Flamethrower is killing everything while also hitting the boss, you do exceptionally well dot. And after 1 mag or 2 mags, you can really hurt the boss and then have your teammates finish up and clean up. Next, we have Anointing Blood. We're using the Flamethrower. We're close range anyways. This is just free damage. There's no point not to have it with the Flamer like this. If you're not running this, though, you're not running a point-blank weapon, you don't necessarily need this, so you could remove this as well, giving yourself another talent point. Now, I move to the left here, and unfortunately, it is a shame that we have to hit Disdain. It's not easy to hit multiple enemies unless you're using the light attack spam with the dueling sword, but this is really useful just to give you a little bit extra damage on each hit. It's not terrible, unless you thrust in well and angle it to hit multiple enemies. But then we have Replenish Toughness per second while within 5 meters of at least 3 enemies. Because of the density in Havoc, you're going to have this all the time, so you're just going to get toughness back constantly, which is nice. It just helps you survive a little bit and take less damage if you do get hit. Then we have Toughness Boost. Then we have Bleed for the Emperor. You could go to the right, which is Replenish Toughness on heavy attack kill, which we do a lot, so you could get a lot of toughness back. That is totally up to you. I like it in case we take a big hit, other than from an overhead from a Crusher or Mauler, which will put you into 1 health and instantly fully corrupt you, based on how Havoc works. This will help you just survive and not take massive wound damages, though, from other enemies. Then we have Sunstorm Grenade. Now, this grenade, I think, is the best grenade for Havoc. And the reason is because it just stuns everything in a large radius. And when you get swarmed by a bunch of armor, being able to stun everything and then do damage to them with a grenade like that is so important and so efficient that you can just clean them up and finish them off with a flamethrower or have your teammates melee them or anything like that. It's also good for clutch revives and really making sure that your team doesn't lose. Then down to the left. Now here's where things can get you can get interesting and you can kind of mix stuff up. We go melee damage, toughness damage reduction. Now here you can remove both of these if you don't think you need them. I don't like being interrupted when I'm using my flamethrower, and I don't like being interrupted when I'm charging my melee attack. So I like Thy Wrath Be Swift. It is a shame that Dance of Death is where it's at, because it is kind of a dead perk when you run it with the flamer. But it is on there, so we do take it because we want to get to Thy Wrath Be Swift. If you don't run these, though, you can also take off these 3 here and put them into something else. One instance being Duelist, which would be very strong and very efficient. You would have this up almost all the time on Havoc, so there is no downsides to that. Then going on the left, though, we have Movement Speed, and then we have Until Death and Holy Revenant. So we get health back as well as the ability to not die. So again, we can take an overhead if something happens, if a teammate backs up into us and they make us take an overhead for some reason because they're not minding their situational awareness. This helps us not get insta-killed. And if we don't take an overhead and we go to 1 HP, like if we're fighting gunners, we can then rush the gunners and get some of the HP back and maybe trade with them a little bit and put ourselves at 1 wound of health, which is fine for this build specifically. But then down the middle, we have the Emperor's Bullets. Give your melee attacks 30% impact strength and 10% attack speed for 5 seconds after emptying your ranged weapon. We're not going to use this too much, but it is on there just in case. We have Unremitting, which is stamina cost. You could go to the right here, but Hammer of Faith is really bad on the dueling sword. You really don't need this. The special already stuns enemies. You don't need extra impact strength. The special does it already for you. But we have minus 20% sprint stamina cost, which is good. Lets us run around better. Then we have Sainted Gunslinger. This can actually be really useful for the Flamer, as you get a 30% reload bonus speed to the flamethrower itself, meaning that we actually can fire it for the first time and mag dump essentially, and if anything is still alive, get a reload off fast enough that we can still shoot before they are definitely closed in on us and forcing us to start meleeing again. Then we go down to Beacon of Purity. Now, as we talked about before, if you get overheaded, Beacon of Purity will cure that corruption of your last wound. and make it so you can actually recover some HP. And also your teammates, if they take any chip corruption, this will help keep them at just missing health as opposed to fully corrupted. Thus, they can heal better off of aid kits and stim packs and anything like that. If you don't take Beacon of Purity and you don't want to run any of this tree, that gives you 4 slots to work with. Technically 3 though, because unless you get rid of these slots over here on the right, you need to go into Benediction and still go into Toughness boost. But otherwise, you can remove this again and then go into other stuff that you may find more valuable. Going down, though, we have Toughness damage reduction. And then we have arguably the best thing for Zealot during this, which is Chorus of Spiritual Fortitude. You can go into Fury of Faithful if you have multiple Zealots, but I would never recommend running a Havoc mission with 1 Zealot and not having Chorus. The ability to suppress and give a stun immunity and vulnerability, and then just pulsing and giving your teammates toughness is so good in its own right that it is kind of just in a league of its own for Havoc. And Stealth is just not a good weapon ability. So Shroudfield is just not good in Havoc because you break Stealth and immediately get gunned down by a bunch of gunners because it's not just 1 gunner ever. So this is really hard to make use of because of that toughness immunity that you don't have anymore. But then we go down, which suppresses enemies, which is really good. And then we go to the left, which is Holy Cause, which you could argue you could go to the right for more damage, but I like the toughness damage reduction that lasts for 10 seconds. Because once we break it then, we're just tankier and can keep fighting in the horde without having to worry about getting killed even faster. Then we go down with toughness damage reduction. Now again, place you can alternate if you don't want, for instance, like Purity Seal we talked about. But if you're in the Blight spreads, this is just, again, a must. You want to be able to cure all of the corruption so you don't have too much of it. You can go down to the right. And the main thing is you go into Invocation of Death, not the Master's Retribution. And then from here, you could go into Infectious Zeal, which would boost the team's crit chance by 66%, which is insane. Or you can go to the right, which is to boost your own crit chance so you can keep Blazing PD going. Now, Stalwart also gives you 25% toughness damage reduction. The only difference being is that you must keep Fury active for it to work. As opposed to, let's say, for instance, Martyrdom, which is what I have, where you have it active all the time while you're missing health. So you don't have to worry about being at a specific situation to make use of it. But going down here, since this is the version I like to run, it is 10% melee attack speed, 10% health, plus 2 wounds, Martyr's Purpose, which gives us a percent of damage taken is converted to ability cooldown. Then we have Martyrdom, which gives us just more melee damage, which is nice when we're trying to fight and we are, more on the low HP. And then finally, I Shall Not Fall, which gives us toughness damage reduction, as I mentioned earlier. If you're missing 2 bars, that's 13%. And then if you're missing 3 and you're at that 1 wound, again, we're talking about you're stuck at 1 wound, and you keep using Until Death and Holy Revenant, you're going to stay at a 19.5% toughness damage reduction, which is very useful. But otherwise, that's it for all 4 of my builds and just a general purpose use that you can really just pick and load into at any point in time. You can make alterations, obviously there's different variations, but these are the builds I think that at Havoc 40 you kind of need to stick with more or less, and then alternate different things and then try different stuff depending on your team comp as well. But thank you all for watching. If you have any comments or thoughts, please let me know, obviously. And I hope that these give you a different take or idea, or maybe help enlighten or are informative and show you kind of ways to play Havoc, or to give an example of what is expected at the Havoc difficulty. And as always, thank you for watching, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!